When I think back to like the DNA of Medtronic, it's this just relentless optimism that we really can make the world better. You're taking on this idea that you can make the world better in a space like biomedicine, and you own something like a pacemaker. Now it's not, what do you do to be nimble? Now it's, of course we're going to. We owe this to the world because that's how you make the world better. Any drug, like any device, like any implant, there's always some risk. From an engineering standpoint, simpler devices have less things go wrong. When we look at this target, and we look at a pacemaker, and we look at all the things about it, how do we make that simpler? How do we cut those risks for the patient? Because if we can cut the risk for the patient, more patients will get a benefit. So it just becomes part of our charter that we have to do it because we're the ones who can.
Welcome, medtech gurus. Imagine you're writing code for a pacemaker and then watch your own grandmother's heartbeat get regulated by that very code. That's the story of today's guest, Wade Demmer, Engineering Director and former Innovation Director at Medtronic. Wade's career spans more than 2 decades at the world's largest medical device company, where he has combined his background in computer engineering with a passion for solving some of healthcare's toughest challenges. As an engineer, leader, and innovation strategist, he's worked across multiple roles at Medtronic, from developing life-saving algorithms for pacemakers and defibrillators to guiding teams through the innovation process that brings the breakthrough technologies like the Micra, the world's smallest pacemaker, to the market. Wade brings a unique perspective on what it takes to innovate at scale inside a global organization while never losing sight of the personal human impact of the technology. And today he'll share some lessons on building a culture of innovation, engineering for reliability, and what the future of cardiac pacing and medtech more broadly might look like. Hey, Wade, are you ready to be our guru today?
I'll do my best.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we're excited to have you. So tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
Sure. So I'm a recovering computer engineer. I went to school at Iowa State University after growing up in Minnesota, and met my wife there. When I was working on the Micra project, my wife is an architect, and she was working on the Viking Stadium. So US Bank Stadium is one of the larger projects in the history of Minnesota architecture, at the same time as we were working on the smallest pacemaker in the world. So we work at very different scales, my wife and I. I think you could fit a couple trillion Micras into the Viking Stadium.
Yeah, I've never been in that stadium, but I've driven by it, and it really is, quite a nice piece of architecture. I'll give you that.
So that's it's just fun to have like that complete opposite end. Like my problem is making things small enough, and hers are making things big enough.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. It's a nice contrast. I love it. So Wade, you originally saw your path leading to Silicon Valley, if I have this right, but then your grandmother's need for a pacemaker changed everything. So I'm wondering if you could share how that personal moment shaped your career. Can you give us a little insight in the backstory there?
Yeah, so again, I grew up, I played video games, I loved computers. I thought being a computer engineer would be great. I was super fortunate to get internships at Intel. I worked out in California as an intern in college. It was really a fantastic experience learning from the engineers there, and I was all set. Like, I was ready to go make Pentiums. And I didn't know anything about biology. I think my worst class in high school might have been biology. And so this is just not on my radar, right? And then my grandma gets a pacemaker, and I think to myself, this is great. I'm so glad that, the world is able to help my grandma. A group came to our college to recruit students, and they said to us, we need people to write code for medical devices like pacemakers. And it was like a big light bulb came on, because the kind of code I liked to write was always the kind that like actually made the lights blink. It actually made the motors move, like really down there in the guts, really efficient code. And that was what they said they wanted. And so it just sort of felt like something was saying to me, hey, this industry helped your grandma, go help more grandmas. And so I applied to any job I could that was in the biomedical field, and came in and started writing code. And little did I know, a few years down the road, when grandma's pacemaker got replaced, she ended up with one of the ones that I had worked on. So then you're just hooked in the industry forever. And it is amazing how many people in this industry have stories like that. We all have family members who have gotten the benefit of biomedical engineering. And boy, you want to pay back the industry, and you might end up, helping a family member or maybe even yourself someday.
Yeah, that is so true. As you can probably tell by my lighter blonde hair, I've been in this business for 40 something years myself, and it's really is interesting how just a little, just almost just a random event leads you down the path, and then you see what the impact you can have on patients and the practitioners that help the patients. It really is. It does get you hooked, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And just there's so many more patients out there, and you see all the opportunities to get people to a more full life, right? That it's not just saving a life or end stage care, that there's so much in this industry that just helps people live a normal life or a better life. And it's, look, don't get me wrong. I loved the idea of making computers faster. Like, computers being faster was a great thing to do, but it's just a totally different experience to know that you're directly helping make someone's life better.
Yeah, for sure. And then, as I mentioned, you previously had a role of innovation director at Medtronic. So, a lot of our gurus out there are entrepreneurs or soon to be entrepreneurs. And I'm wondering if you could share with us and help our gurus in the sense of what did you learn fostering innovation that might help our listeners out there? Do you have any insights for us?
That's a great question. I was joking a little that the reason that there are so many bookshelves at a bookstore on management and innovation is because there is no one answer. And so you'll get an engineer's answer, which is the best I can do is try to improve your odds. Look, innovation always comes down to a couple of big things, right? You have to have, and you can find these terms anywhere, but I try to simplify it as much as you can. Is it something useful? Is it something you can build? And is it something you can sell? You can patent lots of things you can't sell. You can promise lots of things you can't build. You got to be able to do all three to make a difference in this field. And I think one of the things that we all run into is our own expertise makes us think we can handle one of those legs ourselves. And that's usually not enough. I've been very lucky at a company like Medtronic to have experts in all three of those things, where you build a team and you let them bounce ideas off each other, and you let them, contradict and build something stronger, and your odds just go way up, right? If you're pressure testing it, if you're making sure all three legs of those stools are growing at the same rate, so you're not getting out in front of yourself and overpromising something that can't be built, or you're not just running down a technology rabbit hole because technology is fun, but you're keeping your eye on the ultimate goal. And, it's so much easier in medtech to keep your eye on that goal, because that goal is making patients better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. And I actually wrote down, try to improve your odds, right? Because when I heard you say that, I immediately thought to, at the same time, reducing risk.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Risk for the investor, risk for the provider, risk for the patient, right? So it's really trying to kind of manage or mitigate that risk. Is that how you feel about it?
Absolutely. Risk is really what engineers specialize in, right? We probably talk about risk more than anything else. There's always risk. There's always trade-offs, right? You cannot convince yourself that it will be easy, because then you will absolutely run into all the problems. So how do you surround yourself with the kind of talent that will help you burn down that risk, will help you make the smart trade-offs, won't let you chase something way too far down a rabbit hole just because you love the idea? You have to let go of that ego and be able to build a team of strong people who check each other and balance each other and make each other stronger. And I know that it's easy to think a big company would have a challenge innovating. But the truth to me is, a big company has the resources that they don't have really an excuse not to innovate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. So, building on that, what best practices have you seen for turning early stage concepts into real world life-saving products?
Again, with the biomed industry, first and foremost, do you really believe it's going to help the patients? And if you really believe it's going to help the patients, there's probably a business case that you can go tell someone about. Now, sometimes you have so many good ideas that you have a hard time picking which is the best one. I will tell you, 1,000 times out of 1,000, you're better off in a situation where you have too many good ideas than too much money and no good ideas. But by getting teams together and collaborating across with keeping that big goal in mind, why is this going to help the patients? Why is this going to help the patients in a way that they're willing to go get that specific procedure done? Why is it going to help the patients so much that they're going to say, I want that? And then beating that up as much as possible. And then, of course, all the engineering trade-offs, all the project management trade-offs, all the sale, all those things have to still follow. And you need that collaboration between experts to make absolutely sure you're doing it right. Can you do it on your own? Once in a while, right? Mm-hmm. Once in a while, you can do it with 3 people. But if you want your odds in your favor, you find the best people in the world and you have them beat it up together.
Yes, yeah. And I'm thinking too, as you're talking and sharing that with us, sometimes do you find it's just a timing issue, right? Where there might be a great idea, but it's, maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of its time. Have you ever experienced that?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great example. So Micra is a leadless pacemaker. So for people who aren't in the pacemaker world, traditionally a pacemaker is implanted in the chest, and then there's a wire called a lead that goes down into the heart and sends the electricity down. And it's a fantastic technology. It's been a fantastic technology for 70 years. But if you think about, if I take a paper clip and I bend it 10 times, it's going to break. The lead has a very, very hard job. And we make the best leads in the world, and they're amazing. But what if you didn't have to have that bump up in your chest? What if you didn't have to have the wire down into the heart? What if the whole thing could be invisible and inside the heart? Well, people have been thinking that since 1970. You can go find ideas for a leadless pacemaker from 1970, but the technology just wasn't there. And so the timing is absolutely critical. Market windows are real. Technology windows are real. Mm-hmm. One of the hardest parts is if a project's going to take, say, 5 years, when do you start it? Do you start it when you hope the technology's ready in 5 years? Now you might be too early and it might not work. Do you start it when the technology's ready? Well, now you're 5 years late versus someone who guessed at the right time. Mm-hmm. So how do you make sure your technology scouting is intersecting really, truly what the technology can do? Because some of the ideas in this space are really, really old, and they've just been waiting for the technology to come along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting and helpful, right? That whole timing, but at the same time, it's also balancing that risk that we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah. If you're way out on the front edge, it will be a much more expensive, risky project.
Yeah.
You got to balance it with the other risk. If you're really late, that's a different kind of risk. The risk that you missed. It's too late and somebody's way in front of you and taking it away.
Yeah, I love that. And, you touched on this a minute ago, Wade, too, and I was curious about this because we often hear that large companies can struggle with that agility that you're referring to. So I'm curious if you can share with us how Medtronic balances that structure with creativity to make sure these new ideas come to light and thrive.
And that's a great question, because we all know the stories of the companies who invented a technology but squashed it because it didn't match their business model and then got beat by an upstart. Look, when I was at Intel, Andy Groveline was only the paranoid survive, right? Our founder is Earl Bakken, and he had a different view. When I think back to the DNA of Medtronic, it's this just relentless optimism that we really can make the world better. And once you take that on, and once you're taking on this idea that you can make the world better in a space like biomedicine, and you own something like a pacemaker, right? Well, now it's not, what do you do to be nimble? Now it's, of course we're going to, right? Of course it's going to be us, right? We have to do this. We owe this to the world because that's how you make the world better. A leadless pacemaker, the reason we went after it isn't because it was a cool technology. It's because pacemakers are wonderful, wonderful machines. They've gotten very mature. They've gotten very good. A pacemaker to a doctor who implants pacemakers can almost be a routine procedure. But like any drug, like any device, like any implant, there's always some risk. There's always some chance of infection. There's always some chance of something going wrong. And from an engineering standpoint, simpler devices have less things go wrong. So when we look at this target and we look at a pacemaker and we look at all the things about it, well, how do we make that simpler? How do we cut those risks for the patient? Because if we can cut the risk for the patient, more patients will get a benefit. So it just becomes part of our charter that we have to do it because we're the ones who can.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really like that. And to dive in the story a little deeper, right? Because you touched on that pacemakers have been around for 70 years, right? And we've watched them develop. So help us out with what was that vision behind that rethinking that led you to such a dramatic innovation as the Micra? Can you take us behind the scenes and kind of walk us through that story a little bit?
You absolutely. I think there's a lot of myth around invention in the world, right? That it's this solo genius sitting in a dark room writing on napkins and voila, we have an invention. And it's rarely that simple. A project like Micra, I mean, the saying that success has 1,000 fathers, absolutely true. We have technologists who are looking at how to miniaturize things. We have market people who are looking at what the market needs. We have physician partners who are dreaming. We have all these different groups. And, when you see this all line up and you say, what do you really want? And what you really want is things where the patient doesn't feel like they have a major surgery. You want things that are very unintrusive or uninvasive to a patient and to a patient's life. So everything we do, you're always looking, how do you make it less invasive, less intrusive? These trends all went towards smaller. They all went towards simpler procedures. They all went towards inside rather than, disconnected. And so the idea that we were going to make small miniature devices that went and dealt with individual problems in an individual location, that's been there for quite a while. And so then you have all these different groups trying to figure out when for this disease, when for this product line, when. And so I think it, again, you have to treat it almost as if it's a foregone conclusion. Because it's the direction, it's the mega trend that we all want as healthcare consumers. We all want those low risk high benefit items when we need care. So that's a big part of it for me.
Yeah, I can see that, right? And part of me is also thinking you and your team must be really optimists because as you're moving this along, it's got to be frustrating from time to time if the timing's not right or if you're trying to resolve, an algorithm or what have you, right? So your team must be just, really raving optimists, I would think.
I mean, I like to think of optimism, sometimes people think optimism is naivete, but there's a different kind of optimism out there, and that relentless optimism. And it's not saying the world will be better. It's saying we will make the world better. Mm-hmm. And this is what I've seen it. I got to learn this from the people before me. I try to hope people after me learn it, but it's just been handed down. And there was one guy on the Micra project who had worked at Medtronic for something like 20 years and had never gotten a product to market directly. But over those 20 years, he had all these different ideas where then the grandchild of that idea got to market. The grandchild of that idea got to market. All these things that were so far up front that eventually got there. And then he got to work on Micra, and it was like he was the one. And he got to put it in. He got to work with doctors. And so, yeah, you just have to know to keep pushing, and the world will catch up,
Yeah, what a cool moment for him, I'm sure, right, to see that happen. So let's make this a little more personal, perhaps. I'm wondering if you have any particular patient stories that you can share that might, illustrate the difference that some of your innovations make. Do you have any examples for us?
Oh, I mean, so one cultural thing at Medtronic is every year we have the holiday party, and the holiday party is all patient speakers. And they all come and they all tell their stories, and we all cry, and then we all go home and hug our kids because so many of the stories are, and as I blacked out, all I could think is I'll never see my kid again. And then I woke up in a hospital bed with my kids hugging me, and we're all bawling, and so, yes, I mean, it is driven home all the time. And we have our personal stories. Like, when my grandma got her pacemaker, my grandpa at the time, was, slowly dying from congestive heart failure and diabetes. And he said to her, "You're so lucky that they can fix what you have." Right. And so you wear that for your entire career, and you hear these stories from patients. And it's, even if it's little things, right? There was a patient who got a Micra, and he had been given a different pacemaker at one point and told he couldn't lift his arms up. Now, long term, you're supposed to be able to. It's really only a short term thing, but he didn't understand that, and so he stopped playing golf, and he loved golf. And then after he got the Micra, he said, "Can I play golf?" And they said, "Yeah, of course, of course." And so then he went back to playing golf and loved it. So it doesn't always have to be as dramatic. If you can just get someone back to their full life. I imagine patients that aren't even necessarily real. Someone who has always wanted to take a trip to Rome, and they retire and they're tired, they're worn down, their heart rate's too low, they have sinus node dysfunction, and then they get a pacemaker, and now they can take that trip they've always wanted to take, right? So absolutely, you got to keep all these patients in mind, and it's not just the life-saving, it's also the quality of life, because in the end, we all want quality of life as long as we can have it.
Yeah, for sure. That quality of life is the big thing, right? And just making sure that we're thriving as individuals and not just getting through the day, right? Yeah, I love that. So I'm kind of curious, Wade, we touched on kind of the past where, how pacemakers have developed to where they're at. From your perspective, as just an engineer and an innovator, what do you think is next for pacing and cardiac innovation? Where are we going to be in the next decade?
I'm young enough that I hope that I remain employed for that decade. So here's the thing. We are always looking at making the sick heart act like a healthy heart. Always, right? So you come in, something's wrong with your heart, we want to fix that. And when pacemakers first started, they were pretty limited in what they could fix. Over the 70 years, they've been able to fix more and more things and fix it better in better ways. But there are still so many more things out there. And once you start talking about quality of life, how low does someone's rate have to get before they should get a pacemaker? Well, right now, that's a decision based on the risks of a pacemaker and the benefits to the patient. You think about something like an artificial knee, and how many people wait to get the artificial knee because the surgery is very large, very complicated, takes a long time to recover from. If there was a gel you could just inject in your knee would be better, you'd get an artificial knee much earlier. And so I think it's the same thing for us, right? How sick does the heart have to be before we want to help it? Well, we want to help it immediately. And so we're always going to try to figure out what the next way is to help a heart that's just a little bit less sick, or take a heart and make it just a little bit better. To say we're halfway is probably hubris, right? We probably have a long ways to go before sick hearts are healthy hearts. And so I think that's really the direction we're always trying to point the ship.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that's a little job security for you at the same time, right?
It would be great to just solve it, but
Right.
it is probably a problem that we will just continue to chip away at rather than ever truly solve.
Yeah, for sure. And then, Wade, without giving away any trade secrets, right, because of your background in innovation, are there any other areas in medtech, as you kind of sit there and survey the landscape, are there any other areas that you see that are really ripe for disruption and of need of new approaches out there?
To some extent, all of them, right? Where do you feel like if you went into a hospital today, your care would be perfect? They would give you the perfect answer for your problem. There are no drugs without side effects. There are no procedures without risks. There's nothing in all of medicine that takes a sick organ and makes it perfect. And so, I think the real question is, which ones are the technology close to being ready to actually make a step change difference? Because disruption is a tricky word, right? There's iterative innovation. We can just keep chipping away, and we are going to do that. But sometimes you need to make a big step. A little bit smaller pacemaker is great. It's great, but it doesn't fundamentally change how you experience your pacemaker. And so we make it a little smaller, we make it a little smaller, we make it a little smaller, we make it a little smarter. Then we make this big disruption. And I think that that's the key is where are the places, obviously I bring up artificial knees, right? Like if you could see a technology that could be a minimally invasive artificial knee that had very short recovery time, that would be an amazing disruption. Everyone would rather have an injectable artificial pancreas than any diabetes regimen that currently exists. All these places are ripe for disruption when the right technology comes along to help them make that step change.
Yeah, that's very helpful. So I'm also wondering, right? So if you're that young engineer at Iowa State right now, or you're just starting your company, what advice would you give to an innovator or an engineer who's trying to bring their own breakthrough ideas to the market? What would you tell them?
I mean, two things there. One is even if you're not a biomedical engineer, there's room for you in the biomedical industry. I was a computer engineer. I worked on Pentiums. They wanted me to write algorithms for pacemakers instead of Pentiums. Like everything you do in engineering, marketing, sales, any of those things, there's an analog over in the biomed industry where you get to directly help people. So first off, that's just my pitch for anyone listening. Second off, to more directly answer your question, get really good at finding people who are really good at things you're not good at, right? You are probably good at something. You have a talent you're really good at, but don't let that turn into thinking you can do it all. And if you try to run it by yourself, you will not have the odds in your favor. Get the experts, right? Find a place where you can work with people who are smarter than you every day and learn from them. Again, biology was my worst class in high school. For 24 years, I've been surrounded by some of the smartest biomedical people in the world. And you can't help but learn amazing things in that sort of environment. So get those people. Make sure you're not the smartest person in the room. Make sure that you're helping too, right? You want people to learn from you as well, but make sure you're always learning and always collaborating, because you just will never have the odds in your favor if you're going solo.
Yeah. Do you find that that's a mindset sometimes, though? I'm thinking, I've talked to some innovators that are really afraid of sharing because they're concerned that somebody's going to take their idea and run with it. How do you and your team kind of solve or address that kind of an issue?
I mean, that might be one good thing about working for a big company. It's the company's idea, right? So now it's a matter of, heck, the company's got a lot of ideas. Let's get it in the hopper. Let's combine it with other things. Let's get something to the patient that really helps. I get how a solo innovator could be worried that a big company will steal their idea. I mean, part of the challenge is there's a good chance a big company has actually already thought of your idea, right? But maybe this is my pitch for occasionally, go work for a big company. Go work for a place where there are people who, it won't be exactly your idea, but people who amplify, synthesize, recombine, people who take your idea and drive it to where it has to get to actually help the patients in the end. And if you can find a company that you can collaborate in, chances are the idea will end up better than what your idea originally was. And so you have to let go of that ego. You have to let go of the hubris. You have to let go that you're going to do it alone, and really question why you think you should, right? Why? Why do you think you should do it alone? And I just like being able to work with people where we're all pointing to the same mission, and the mission we're pointing to is making that sick heart healthy.
Yeah, I like that. And I was thinking as you were saying that, it's almost like maybe working for that big company for a while it's almost like getting that advanced degree, right? Because you are getting all those inputs, but it's a practical approach, right?
I mean, I totally agree with that. I look and I think it took me longer than it would have if I went to a university and got a biology degree. But the difference is I was never going to do that. Right? So, here I get to learn. And as I'm learning, I get to put things out the door that help people. And, would I have been happy in Silicon Valley? Sure. Right. Again, I'm an optimist, but I live in Minnesota, and I guarantee my dollar goes a little farther here than it does when I'm looking for an apartment in Silicon Valley. So, it's kind of a best of all worlds, right? It's a place where you get to just constantly be surrounded by, really clever people that teach you, and every week when you go home, you think about all the people who got something to help them that you worked on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, Wade, this sounds like a really exciting time for you and your team at Medtronic. How can our listeners out there learn more about you and your team and your work and what's going on within Medtronic and the innovative journey that you're pursuing?
Well, certainly, Medtronic has a robust website. Talks about all the different therapies there. I tend to work on stuff that maybe isn't going to show up on a website yet. You'll hear about what I'm working on in a couple years when we launch it. If people wanted to contact me directly, I would say LinkedIn's probably your best chance. Although, like any social media site, there's so many bots and spam that I'm not on LinkedIn all the time. But I will do my best for your listeners.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, Wade, first of all, I'd like to just thank you and acknowledge you for being our guru today. And, we appreciate all the insights and information that you brought for us.
I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048 @gmail.com. And I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.